Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast, where we talk with the people behind the current events and breakthroughs in brain implants in an understandable way, helping bring together various fields involved in neuroprosthetics. Here is your host, Laden Yurachek.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast. Today we have kind of a different episode than we usually have. So I'm talking to Lowell Thompson of the podcast Learning with Lowell, and he talks a lot about basically bioscience, and I guess bioscience would be the best descriptor. And so we kind of have a collaboration episode. This actually will be posted on his episode or his podcast as well. And we have kind of a half interview, half, we talk about half time. So I think it was really interesting. And he has interviewed, some people that I've interviewed, and he has had some people in the neural implant space, or at least the neuro space. So very, very cool stuff. And if you like it, then you can check out his podcast. Yeah, you have a great show. I mean, Learning with Lowell, I really enjoy it. You kind of have a broad perspective of what's going on in the science field and just like hot stuff coming down the line, and focused on funding and everything like this. I really enjoyed it. It's kind of cool. And I think it's kind of funny. It's like Learning with Lowell. We're learning along with you, right?
That's the idea. My girlfriend, I'm not good at naming things. I would have named it The Road to Awe, which is in relation to the Fountain movie I recommend everyone check out with Hugh Jackman. But it has a vague religious tone, which was going to be about discovery. But my girlfriend is much better at naming things. So Learning with all the ideas to get people to learn along with me. But something I'm curious about, because you've been doing this for, I think, a year and a half, right? Or 2 years?
Yeah, something like that, year and a half.
Yeah, so what are some, not your all-stars, because then it's some people will feel left out, but what are some notable interviews you've done where the people just seem really special, or that you can remember right now?
It is kind of, I guess, biased in this way because it probably is some of my first episodes. And I think that was probably the most influential just because it went from 0 to, 1,000. And it probably is my first three, Walter Voigt, Chad Boton, Kip Ludwig. And that's because they kind of introduced the field to me, and they're doing really, really amazing stuff. So the big thing I learned actually with Kip Ludwig is about bioelectronic medicine, which is basically brain implants, but kind of in the peripheral nerve. So instead of going, into the brain, it goes into the rest of the body, and you can control organ function with this. And they're just doing stuff all the time with it. And you can control the pancreas, the liver. And the big thing is that you can replace pharmaceutical drugs in a lot of these cases. So that to me was completely new. And it's just because this is the guy that introduced me to it, that my mind was blown and literally sent me down a path of this, and now I'm kind of working in a lab that's working on this. So I would have to say those are probably the most, but it's not because they're amazing or more amazing than my other guests.
Mm-hmm. Well,
how about you?
Well, just to follow up on that real quick, and then I'll answer your question. But how does it regulate it? Is it kind of like an insulin pump type thing, or how does it regulate the thing? Is it only in the lab, or can they do it as people are in the wild, not in the wild, but in their daily lives? How does that actually work? I'm very curious.
Yeah, in the wild. It only works in the jungles of Africa. No, no, actually, I mean, right now it's just animal studies mostly. I don't think they're doing much with humans, that they're not probably to that level of technology. But basically, they're just doing it on mice and rats right now. But it's kind of a broad course way of doing things. It's not really refined yet, but it's still amazing. I mean, it just kind of sends a signal through the whole nerve, and then the right thing happens. So that everybody's just well, we had a good result. So, we don't really know what happened, but it worked somehow. So that's kind of the state that the technology is at, but it's moving very, very quickly. I mean, I'm saying this field really got launched 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and there's been huge advances. So it's going by leaps and bounds, and every 6 months it's just doubling pretty much.
I think that's one of the things that I've found, and I will answer your question. I'm sorry about this, but that's one of the things I found in science that I think is really helpful for people to understand, is that everything isn't known. Even stuff that we use every day, like anesthesia, we don't know why that works. We just use it. We're just we put this thing in here and it kind of comes out how we want it to. I think that's a really fascinating thing about science. Scientists work to make known what is unknown, but it's always there's always something else. And a lot of things that we use every day are just not the reasons, the causes, the whys of how it works is just not known. And I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, sorry for interrupting, but that's exactly it. I mean, like, I think the big magical thing or the big aid in this field is how plastic and how adaptable the brain and the body is. So I was talking to Robert Shannon at the Neural Interfaces Conference in Minneapolis in July, and he's kind of the pioneer. He's kind of the founder of cochlear implants of this field. And, for a while, they're just doing one electrode. They're just doing one channel. So basically, it's like having Morse code, but for all the sound in your life. Cochlear implants are kind of like hearing aids for people who can't hear. But people understood this, and some could even talk on the phone with essentially Morse code for all of sound, and it's just amazing. But it's not a testament how great we are, how great our technology is. It's how adaptable our brain and our body is. So that's the amazing thing.
Right, like if you're young enough and you lose half your brain, it doesn't matter because we can adapt to it and we'll be more or less fully functioning. But as you get older, you're less adaptable. Which the only point I'm trying to make there is that like you can lose half your brain when you're young and still be fine, which is crazy. Like I'd want to lose none of my brain. But
yeah. Well, and some of people we know have been walking around with less than half a brain.
Yeah, and you wouldn't really know. Like they're like the one brain just takes over. Like it just kind of does the role of both. But to answer your question, like 2-3 minutes late, I would say in relation to what we're talking about, I really love what Ben Paul is doing with Neuraloom. It is fantastic, and the guy has a really good mindset. I like to look at the people as well as what they're building. Like I think good technology without good people behind it, kind of like you get one of those what the Isle of Dr. Moreau, where the guy's just kind of like building evil things on an island, and it's not good for people. And so he just has like this really good reason for why he's building what he's building, which is basically a way to interface with the optic nerve, and in a way that he describes as before, like the old way of doing it, it was like typing with your fists on a keyboard, and now with his technology, it's like using your fingers, and that's a big deal. That's a big leap. But another person would not really in the neuro space, but he basically is the reason that Neuraloom exists. Ben Paul exists in this space is Dom from Deep Science Ventures. That guy is built kind of like a Y Combinator. If people aren't familiar with the UK market in the UK, and it is fantastic. Like the stuff coming out of there, he really has something special. And then I think if I have to round it out with a third, there's Leo Petraskin of Neural Analytics, which has found a way to, like heart rate monitors that you see basically everywhere. Not like the things where you like shock paddle people if they're having like a heart attack at the mall to like make sure their heart's like realigned.
A defibrillator?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. His technology will be as ubiquitous as that in the sense that it's a way that if you hit your head, you can put this thing attached onto you and it'll tell you if you need to see, like it'll basically kind of like permeate your bone and detect what's going on in your brain and let you know if there's been damage or if you should be seeing a doctor using, like right now you have to use a technician to like kind of like they do all the readouts and they'll be like, oh, okay, this is what it means. But eventually they're going to have one where it's basically like you hook it up to someone, they hit their head, they're like, yeah, you've had a mild concussion, you should go see a doctor, make sure this is okay. Or even to an extent where they can let you know when you're having a stroke and they can tell you the extent of the stroke. And like it's like in the field, which the original application of it was for the military. So they have a very good need for knowing when a soldier has suffered some type of traumatic injury on their brain, because that's where a lot of the PTSD is coming from. He can be there before you can get him to the machine that can do like the really great imaging. He can be there and you can see and detect it. But those are the three that really stand out to me. But I would put like Ben Paul as number one. That guy's fantastic.
Yeah, wow, that sounds really interesting. Actually, this last one, it really reminds me of what former guest, Dr. Christine Welle had on, she basically had the same thing, like measuring concussions, without an MRI, you could do it in the field. That's really interesting. So a lot of people are working on, I guess, similar things. Great minds think alike. Yeah, that's really cool.
Well, something from his episode, that Leo's episode, that I really liked, other than the fact that the last half of it, he literally, we open up our monitor, like the web browser, and he walks me through how to start a biotech startup, how to get funding, and how to get intellectual IP from my laptop.
Wow.
Yeah, so like granted, there's more steps to it. Granted, it's more complicated than just looking at some screens. But I think there's this great sense that it takes a lot. Like it takes a lot of work and this like Herculean amount. Like you don't know anything for 5 years. And quite frankly, even the people that I've talked with at Indie Bio, like they're seeing that you can see results within 18 months, or half the time. And a lot of the startups that they've been funding, have been able to do stuff like that. And then the idea that you can see what's being funded, you can find intellectual property that's for sale, and I think it's 97% of all like your taxpayer dollars that are going out there and like, doing research every day at universities, it's not being used. And it just sits there. And so the universities are like, oh, you want to use RIP? You want the license for it? Like here you go. Like they're so eager for this. They have licensing departments where the entire job is to help people use their technology. And it becomes their technology so they can build, like it becomes like the nucleus of building a startup in a lot of situations.
Yeah, for sure. I actually just talked to, like a month or two ago, I talked to exactly this, the technology spinoff, department of the University of Florida. And yeah, they have many, many, intellectual property, like just patents just sitting around because, professors, they don't want to quit their job and they don't want to like spend thousands of hours, following a project if, they have other things on their plate. So it really is there. I mean, it's very easy to license something and they're really happy to do it. And then a lot of times if you're a student or maybe even not, like they would help out with it, in the beginning stages. I mean, they would of course take a cut, but it'd be essentially like having an angel investor or a VC or something like this right out the gate. And it's kind of underutilized, piece of information, underutilized thing. And kind of me as an entrepreneur, like an aspiring entrepreneur, I'm just like, oh, I want to do this. But at the same time, I want to develop my own thing, I guess. But it definitely is a possibility. I've heard about, great things like literally somebody came up to them and be like, okay, what's the most promising technology and what's the most ready to market? And they're just like, oh, this one, there's like these self-cleaning IV connectors or something like this. And just some small like little plastic thing that you use in the hospital. Yeah, within a year, they were generating 100K per year and in revenue. And it starts slowly, but if you want to do this entrepreneurial path, build something of your own, then that's definitely the way to do it.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the guests I had on my podcast, or maybe off the podcast, I talked to a lot of science people. They said that there's enough things going on in the biotech spaces and the science spaces where pretty much everyone on the planet could pick a topic and it would be completely different to anyone else's topic and no one would ever really touch elbows because there's just so many interesting things going on. And like a great deal of them could become quite profitable, even beyond the value of, really changing the world for the better, which that's what attracts me to the biotech and science spaces is that when you work really hard and what you work on comes through in a normal startup or in a biotech science related one, a normal startup, they just make a lot of money. They make a new app and maybe it's helpful. Like it makes it easier to connect with your friends, what have you. But if you get it right with a science related thing, you change someone's life like in a meaningful way. Ben Paul is going to give people the ability to see again or a greater ability to see again. And other implant technology like cochlear implants give people the ability to hear. And that's different than just making, as an example, an app, which apps are good too. Like I definitely see the value of them. But I think there's like people talk a lot about return on investment. And for me, I don't think there could be a greater return on investment than meaningfully changing the ways and improving someone's life. And I think that's probably why you're developing what you're working on is that you want to change people's lives as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I see it like that. Like I've always kind of, I guess, thumbed my nose a little bit at Silicon Valley because of the app focused, way of looking at things, because how useful, I mean, even Instagram, like, okay, it does affect billions of people, but how useful is that? Or, let's do an extreme example of like Facebook for dogs. And how useful is that? I mean, it's cute, but is it really helping something? And is it really making the world a better place? That's kind of what I'm thinking. And then with that stuff too, like it's so ephemeral, it goes in and out, so it will probably be gone in like 2 years versus a lot of these medical devices and all this kind of stuff. That's going to be around for decades. And you don't get that with companies nowadays. Like most companies don't stay around for decades. So that's kind of why I like it. And of course, helping people.
Yeah, the people. But is there really a Facebook for dogs?
I've heard about that. I mean, I've heard that it was pitched at least a few times. So yeah.
They're going to get money. There was a startup in Silicon Valley that got something like $200 million and it didn't work out. They didn't talk to their customers at all. So no one wanted to buy it. So they spent $200 million building something that no one wanted.
Wow. Yeah, you would think the people who gave them $200 million would do their due diligence and be like, should we give them $200 million?
It was probably the echo chamber effect where like one person barks and then everyone else hears barking and they're like, oh, we don't want to miss out on the barking until they all get in on it.
Yeah, that's true. Like, ooh, this big person got in on it. Oh, I want to also.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's like, have you read the book Bad Blood?
No, I haven't. I love your book recommendations, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I try to read a book a day. Sometimes it's like a book every other day, but like they're only like 200 pages, so I don't know how long it should take you to read that. But the Bad Blood was, I believe, unless I'm thinking of a different book, about not Thermo Fisher. That's a good company. It's about a lady who built a startup who kind of emulated Steve Jobs and how she dressed and like stared at people a little bit. And it was like with a droplet of blood, they would be able to do a bunch of tests, but like it wasn't deliverable. But like on her board, she had like Kissinger and all these important people because she was able to like, persuade them. But at the end of the day, like her company, it went from like being an $8 billion valued company to, bankruptcy. And now she's in trouble.
Yeah, this is Elizabeth Holmes and
Yeah.
Theranos. This has been huge, especially this year. Like earlier, I think like in April, May, June, something like this. That's when I heard about it, and it was huge. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. But I'll definitely read this book because it sounds very interesting.
It's basically the reporter and how he like sussed it out, which is interesting in and of itself. Another really interesting book, other than the Woolley book about George Church and bringing back the woolly mammoth, would be A Kraken Creation by Dr. Duwadna. Really interesting book. Like it really like it starts with her surfing. I just love that. Like a lot of people when they think of scientists, they think, oh, they're in a lab, they have lab coats. Maybe there's lightning striking behind them if they're evil scientists. And really, those scientists are engineers, by the way. Like scientists wouldn't do that. There's no control variable. But her book, I really like it for how she walks through how they went about creating CRISPR, or really discovering CRISPR, because it was just a natural process in nature. That's another book I'd definitely recommend.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've put both of those in both samples in my Kindle. By the way, back to the Bad Blood, it says here on Amazon now to be adapted into a film with Jennifer Lawrence to star. That's pretty cool.
Wooly's been made into a movie as well. It was picked up before it was even done being written.
Wow.
Yeah, it's gonna be our generation's Jurassic Park, but it's a good Jurassic Park because there's environmental factors, and a lot of geneticists nowadays, like the world leading ones, they got their start from Jurassic Park. Like they were like, oh, this is really interesting, and they're like, yeah, okay, and then they got into it. Like I always think it's interesting, like where like the first catalyst comes from, because one of the things that got me interested in psychology, and I try not to tell people this because they usually have a very bad reaction to it. It was because of watching the movie Silence of the Lambs, because I was intrigued by the idea that someone could have a really good understanding of another person to the point where they could like profile them. And now Hannibal, he had a great understanding. He was very twisted on how he used it, but I was intrigued by that idea of like there was a way to study the brain. And then I just like completely dived into it after that.
That's really cool. What is your aims with the podcast? Like what you're learning with Lowell, and I think it's kind of funny because we're learning with you, but what is your goals with learning with Lowell?
Well, I kind of think the best way to understand it is to kind of see why I made it, which is a similar question, but not the same question. And basically, it started several years ago while I was in the hospital for an undiagnosed illness. And basically, every week I was in and out of like the ICU. Not every week, but more than you should in a lifetime. And I had a nurse, just to give an example, how like the ICU is not a place you should want to go to. I had a nurse that when I woke up for the first time there was really happy. And it's like, oh, you want your nurse to be happy. But after teasing it out on several conversations, she let it be known to me that over the course of 20 years of being an ICU nurse, I'm the first person to leave alive. And so, like, the ICU is not the place you want to go to hang out. So, like, I was in there quite often. It took a while, but I eventually found a good diagnosis and drug treatment that would make me better. And I flew out to meet the people who made the drug. And they all like this great passion, basically what we've been talking about this entire time, like this meaningful desire to create value and change people's lives. And in this case, it saved my life. I would have died without it. And so they had this crazy amount of passion. And so ever since then, I've been looking for ways to get people not only inspired, but showing the scientists that are building stuff every day that aren't getting the respect or the appreciation they're due. And in the news, you either hear about the scientists that are hyping their work too much, and so it's kind of biased, or you're hearing about failures, but you never hear about the people working every day to make all of our lives better. And so that's like every why of each episode is to kind of inspire, show you a different person's life, show you the life of a scientist, and kind of show how you could do the same. because we basically talk about what people are passionate about. And passion, like when I hear someone talk about passion, it could be anything. A kid comes up to me or anyone comes up to me and starts talking about their passion for baseball. I don't like baseball. I'm an American, but like baseball is like our pastime. It's not something that interests me, but I'll listen to someone who has a passion for baseball and they talk about the statistics and what they love about it. And it's the same thing with my podcast with these scientists. Like, you may not understand neural engineering, but when you talk about when you listen to Ben Paul talk about why he loves neural engineering, you're going to want to learn more. And that's really why I made the podcast, because I think there's a hunger in America for science, but then it's how do you get the science to people in a way where you can still hear the passion, where it's not just. At 2015, I published a paper that showed that there was a 37% variable on, whatever. It's like just math and science at a certain point, and you lose the human element, which is saving lives or making a life different. But that's the why, and that's the where, I suppose, into your question. But what about you? What was your goal?
I guess I'll add to that, like, you're a fan of genetics, and it gets really crazy with genetics, like with some of the protein names and everything like this. And it's like the NTQRF5 gene, upregulates this, and then the NTSSPP763, and it's just like, is this like, did a cat just walk on the keyboard or what's going on? And so, yeah, it's kind of a inhuman way of doing things. And I guess, yeah, that is why I started mine as well. Like, I actually did it to get a job, and to find, I had applied for some PhDs, and I wanted to make sure that I applied to the right one. And, with my, I don't know, interests in aligned and everything like this. And what I was kind of running into was, they're like, okay, well, we don't really care about your idea. We want you to work on our idea, which, of course makes sense. But, I'm like, no, I don't want to, I want to do my idea, or I want to do at least some version of my idea. And so basically doing this to get in contact, find out, like, what does environment look like, and talk to a lot of people and see who gets me the most excited. And that is, and then another thing too, like, scientific papers are owned by journals, and they're often behind paywalls, and you might have to pay like $50 for one article, which is 8 pages, or $300 for access to the whole journal. So I'm just like, I'll just talk to the person who did the research themselves. And the beautiful thing about podcasting, besides of course that I had experience with it, is that you can't really complicate things too much, because with YouTube and videos, you can, show the NTGR5 gene or whatever, and it can still be kind of complicated in human, and especially writing. That's the one where you can do the most complicated. But if it's just a conversation, there's no visual aids, so you have to explain it very, very simply, because I won't understand it. I won't be able to follow you. Nobody would be able to follow you. So you kind of speak in a human language, and that's what I really like. And now that's what my audience has really liked, is that being able to speak in a human language, because this stuff is not hard. It's really not. It's not difficult as well at all. Like, I think if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it. And so if you can't explain it to a 10-year-old, then you don't understand what you're doing. And so that's kind of what I try to do. And with that goal, the getting a job, it is kind of mission accomplished. I found a great lab here in University of Florida, and in a lab that I think is interested in my ideas and has the capability of, doing my ideas. And also their stuff is really, really cool. So I'm excited on all fronts, and the workmates are great. And I've really grown to love Florida. So, it's kind of mission accomplished. So now I guess the next mission is to bring the community together and just know what everybody's doing, like, all the time, and get even more people in the field in a very low friction way, like a very easy way. Like, how do you get an 18-year-old or 20-year-old just trying to decide, what they want to do in their life? How do you get them in? And it's just like, yeah, reading 50 scientific papers, which will probably take you a few weeks, is probably not the right answer. And especially if they're, entertaining multiple options. So that's my show.
Something funny about what you said in the beginning when you were like listing genes and did a cat run on it, I could not tell if you were joking or not. Those could literally have been genes. Like, that's the funny thing about genetics. Like, it is, I don't know if those were like legit things that you read and like, oh, the TP blah 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 is an actual gene that you're researching, but like, you can't really tell, like, especially when you're reading it in the research. Like, it's a kind of a world unto itself. And a lot of articles in journals, they're not really made for people, not general people or people looking to make a decision. They're made for scientists to learn about what other scientists are doing to stay current. It's not, we spend billions of dollars a year to create science that's really only good for other scientists. And then it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit of, keeping those scientists well fed. But then what about the people that are like right on the fence of, I want to do science, but I don't know how. Like, how do you get them in, exactly what you're saying? And I think there's 2 quotes that really like bring out this concept of like getting people into the sciences or helping them make that decision, which is like there's two great Benjamin Franklin quotes. They might be Benjamin Franklin that, you know, sometimes they're misattributed on the internet, but I'm pretty sure they are because I read his biography and he referenced one of them. But there's the greatest repository of knowledge and innovation isn't found in the library. And if you update it, it would be, you know, the internet. It wouldn't be in either of those things. It would be in the grave because so many people don't take their shot or they're discouraged or people, you know, life happens and they just keep going down the line and line and then they're dead. And then they aren't able to make their contribution to society and innovate or help in the innovation. And we all would have been better for it. Like, the world would be better if everyone worked on what they worked when they had these innovations to make them happen. And the second one is a lot of people die at 25 and are buried 40 or 50 years later. And what that means is people stop trying. They settle. They take a job that they know they don't want, and they know they shouldn't be in this job. And they're at 31 and they're like, I want to be in the sciences. I want to do, you know, there's a researcher on my podcast who, if I'm remembering the right one, she did not specialize in penguins the first time she went to college. She went back to college either in the early 30s or early 40s, got that specialization, and you think, oh, she's probably too far behind. She's not able to do meaningful work. She is called the penguin expert. She literally does TED Talks now. She goes to and hangs out with penguins. She's saved thousands of penguins' lives. Like, the world is different because she took that shot and because she did it in a logical way, so she wasn't kind of like putting her head on the chopping block, which is like, you know, getting $300,000 in debt for something that maybe not be profitable is like something to be mindful of. But if in her case, she was very mindful of it. She was very much about the passion of it. And that's why she did it. And she was able to actually make a meaningful contribution. I think that's kind of what both our podcast is about, is like getting people off the fence and seeing what they're doing so that they don't take that innovation with them to the grave. Like, all these ideas you had, as you told people about, they're like, no, we want you to do our ideas. And granted, it is good to gain skills from helping other people on their projects so you can build your own even better. But imagine if you just like sublimated yourself into those projects, then you bottlenecked yourself in, and then you maybe even forgot why you were even interested in those ideas in the first place, and then you never make those innovations. And then we're all poorer for it. I don't know what your innovations are, but I imagine that only you could do them like you would do them because you're the only, you know, you that exists.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I probably would still be able to do those ideas, but I'm kind of more worried that it would send me down the wrong path, like the wrong direction. Like, I wanted to go north, and actually now I'm going west. And maybe by the time I realize like what's happened, then I'm completely different in a different place. But I mean, that could be useful. Maybe that could have been good because, you know, like with this penguin lady example, it kind of is the combination of skills. And with a combination of skills, you can become the best person in the world. Like, whatever she was doing before, let's say it was like, I don't know, software programming or accounting or something like this, and then penguins, and then you bring those two skills together, you might be the only, you know, software programmer penguin person there. So it is kind of amazing. And that's, you know, what I like about what I'm doing too, is I'm the only brain implant podcaster, you know, and therefore I'm the best.
It's like only in hindsight do you realize how valuable these things are. Innovation is where you take two or more things that are seemingly unrelated and combine them in a new way. Like, that's it. Like, you don't have to build an entirely new widget. You just take tractor, internet, and robots, and now you have something that mows your lawn for you. You know, that's an innovation, which is interesting. That it is really as simple as that. Like, I think sometimes people kind of build it up to be like, oh, I can't innovate. And it's like, I guarantee as you're driving home from work, or the last time you had something that, you know, makes you angry, you thought of a different way of doing it. After you got through the anger, you were like, oh, I wonder how you could do this differently. Or, you know, there's like 1,000 different ways of doing it. Like, some people like couponing as a simple way, and they like use coupons in a way that the stores probably didn't expect, and you save a lot of money, which is great for you. But there's an example of someone that only in hindsight do you realize that their entire life was building to be meaningful, and it's Teddy Roosevelt. When he was a kid, Teddy Roosevelt had asthma, and he almost died a bunch of times, and it made him really physical. Like, he worked out when he could work out. Like, he took his body really seriously, and he became, like, when he was president, he actually went blind in one eye because he had a boxing match in the White House. And I don't think he lost, but at the same time, he did go, like, he detached his retina. And like, in his life, you see these moments where, you know, basically being sick and then having to like work through that and having that iron will determination to like be physical had had made him different his entire life. And in fact, like I think Teddy Roosevelt on a number of occasions basically stopped world wars from breaking out because he knew how to, be physical, as the saying goes, speak softly and carry a big stick, because he knows the value of taking care of the things you can physically, but then being really smart about how you apply your resources. And he's always had to be really scarce with them. But only in hindsight do you see that made him an effective president.
Yeah, everybody's background, comes into play, and we don't know how it'll work out or how it'll, combine, and if it will be a good combination. But all these examples have been really very much so like it's not one person who did one thing their whole life. It's not like, okay, I'm doing software programming my whole life and I'm never going to do anything else, never going to touch anything else. It's, being able to get inspiration from different places. And that's actually, I mean, before we started recording, I was talking about this, like, yeah, I have this idea, and it's based on, or it's inspired by Eastern medicine. And, I think there's a lot of stuff to be taken from Eastern medicine in the field of brain implants. And it's taking these two things and putting them together, like a field that's been around for 4,000 years, I don't even know, 6,000 years or something like this, and putting it together with this field that's been around for 20 years. And I think there's a lot to be learned. So, and it's easy. It's literally, it's almost plagiarism, honestly.
As the saying goes, you only see far by standing on the shoulders of giants, or on the shoulders of the people who came before you. And actually, I have a question for you. Do you have any like keystone or like interesting questions you like asking people?
Yeah, I like asking about the people's challenges, and one that I kind of like asking now, especially to academics, and I guess to business people as well, is if you had unlimited funding, what would you do? That kind of reframes everything, because everybody wants to just get the next round of funding, but if you had unlimited resources, first of all, I mean, to be in that position is just like, well, what do you do? And that really opens things up. So that's kind of my favorite question. But I've honestly only started that recently, like I think only a few shows ago. I haven't asked that of a lot of people. But how about you?
This is actually one that I am recent as well. This is like my favorite one that I'm going to try and leave each episode with, because it's just like you get so much from it. But it came from when I was talking with George Church in regard to a series I'm doing on longevity, where I research all the scientists on it. And so at the end of the episodes, with like the new ones I've done, I asked people, if you could give longevity, like the perfect form of it that people are working on, to 3 people, and it can't be you or a loved one, who would be those 3 people and why? And I give the example, like imagine Einstein, you gave it to him, past to present, anyone, as long as it's not you or a loved one. And I give the example of, imagine give it to Einstein, he's still alive. Imagine what we'd have, our understanding of the universe would be, because that guy was just a beast of thinking. And so I'd ask you the same question. If you could give, essentially, we'll call it rejuvenation, to anyone past or present that isn't a loved one, who would it be and why?
I've become kind of a fan of, I think his name is John von Neumann. He's kind of regarded as the smartest person who's ever lived. And he, spoke like 7 languages, was incredibly good with math. And he was on the Manhattan Project and everything like this. And everybody was completely in love with him, like really very, very smart guy. So it'd probably be him. But also, oh man, who is Feynman? Richard Feynman, yeah. He's just so, like, reading his books, he's just so cool and so humble. And he's like, oh yeah, also he's like super smart, but he's just so quirky. And I'm just like, that's exactly the kind of person I would want to be around. That's what we need more of in this world. So I guess one of those two. Did you say one person, or it'd probably be it'd be one of those people. But both, it's kind of funny, kind of ironic that both were on the Manhattan Project.
Oh yeah, 3 people. So you get one more.
3 people. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know, some people that are really, I guess a friend of mine that I really like, and kind of unknown. Well, he is pretty known. Like, his name is Mike Bown, and he's the most traveled man in the world. And so he's traveled around the world for like 24 years. And he's also like a big physics nut. So he really follows up on the big, things, the big news in the day. He's very, literate and very up to date on science. But he's also been to every country in the world and has traveled for the last like 25 years. So he's very knowledgeable on 2 fronts. So I guess that's the person that I've interacted with the most, that I respect their opinion the most. And I guess for that reason. But that's honestly just because I was kind of put on the spot. Yeah. So how about you? Who's your 3 people?
Yeah, no, it's kind of like your favorite book. Like it's all good if you don't list like one of them that is like your favorite. But,
and then you remember one like a week later and just like, oh man, I forgot that one actually is number 1.
So, all right, so I would pick, I think Einstein, but it's like almost world breaking. Like, you shouldn't be able to pick Einstein. That guy, he had he was like plugged in. He was like Neo in the Matrix. Like that guy knew too much. Like it took people, I think people are still unpacking things that he came up with because of how integral they were. And he was trying to unify it and do all these things. I think if you could give it to Einstein, which would kind of be like a cheat code, like you really shouldn't be able to answer that. But I think Einstein is definitely one of the people you have to, like, I would go with, because our understanding of the universe would be so different. That guy, he had like a powerhouse in between his ears.
Yeah, I agree that is kind of a cop-out answer. It's like, oh yeah, Jesus, Buddha, Einstein, Mickey Mouse, all those, all those.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't help much if you gave Jesus rejuvenation, but
That's true. That's true.
you know, but we won't go there. But George Church, I really respect and like what he's been working on. He said on numerous occasions that he basically will never stop. Like he will always keep pushing and helping people build things or encouraging people and training people. And that's a good thing. Like he doesn't just sit in a tower and do science. Like he'll help start startups. He'll help start businesses. He's an advisor, like a science advisor to, I don't even know how many companies, probably like 20 of them. And so he's really big on not just having good science, but like applying good science. I love that, because a lot of times I think science stays behind a wall, like we mentioned earlier, like a paywall. And it's like, well, who's it benefiting? And the second one, just thinking current affairs, would have to be Bob Langer. I think there was a study that was done that there's something like 1 billion people that exist today that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that guy, because of the innovations and the research he's done. People out of Boston, so I probably should geographically disperse it a little bit. But who would be the last one? Yeah, you can't do Einstein. Like, it's too cheating. It's like it's Neo exists again. Oh, I definitely like those two.
Yeah, the third one is hard, huh?
Yeah, right. It's like there's so many great people, but like immortality to grant it to them.
That's a big gift.
Well, it's also a curse as well. That's the thing. Like living for a very long time is also like it's a responsibility. Like all these people that we have named, it's a responsibility to live that long, because the assumption is they continue to do what they're doing, that they continue to innovate and build, for hundreds of years. So it's a great responsibility. So it's like, I wouldn't give it to Leonardo da Vinci because he did not share his work. We only know about it because Raphael, his apprentice, kept it all in his attic, and then that guy's son basically sold it all to these people, and then people started learning about it. Like, he was very not well known. The great thing about Leonardo da Vinci is like he had like a super brain, but he kept it to himself due to the time of the era. So I wouldn't give him that ability, because then it's like he's not really going to do anything with it. I'd say Archimedes. I think it'd be crazy to see what he would do. He was like a Bob Langer for the ancient world. Well, like when, I think it was Greece or Rome, someone was conquering his town, and he made war engines and stuff like that. But he actually, like, granted, Leonardo da Vinci did build war engines and things, but he was just too selfish about it. Like, he kept it all to himself. But Archimedes, when he was being captured, the general said, "Bring me Archimedes," like, respectfully, because he was going to be like, "Hey, you're going to work for me now." The soldier who, like, the team that came up to like grab him, they were like, "All right, come on with us." And Archimedes was like, "No, I'm not done yet. Come back later." And apparently he pissed him off so much that the soldier killed him. And it's like, I cannot imagine that discussion after, like, when that soldier went back to his general and was like, "Yeah, he slipped on the knife, I swear." Like, I bet that guy got in, like, some deep crap. But I think it'd be exciting to see what would happen to him if he could keep going for a very long time.
Yeah, for sure. I think actually the quote was, apparently he said, like, "Leave me to my circles."
Yeah. So those are my three. But the funness of that question is, like, the last time I asked it, the person basically referenced 3 people in medical device technology that I had no idea. One of them being over 90 years old that's still innovating in medical device technologies. And it's like, you see a little bit of what that person pays attention to. It's almost like, what's your favorite book? But instead, it's, who are your favorite people? Who are people that you think would be great if they lived longer and could make a bigger impact on the world? And then these people probably have a lot of things about them, like the people we've talked about. You can look any of them up and have books. There's an Einstein book written by Walter Isaacson that's fantastic. If you wanted to learn more about Einstein, he also one about Leonardo da Vinci, which also is very good. There's so much more you can learn just from, like, these types of recommendations.
Yeah, I think those Isaacson books are on my list, and gonna get through them one day. But yeah, definitely, it is kind of a litmus test on seeing who and what is important in your life. So maybe one day I'll have some neural implant people that I'm like, okay, I want to give them immortality because they're doing great work. But yeah, I don't know.
Have you read Old Man's War by John Scalzi?
No, I
You're gonna have
haven't.
to get on this. The people from Paradromics that you interviewed as well, and I recently just put an episode with them. We talked about it in the episode where in Old Man's War they have something called a brain pal that goes inside your brain and like hooks everything up, and so you have like the internet in your head, but it's not connected outside for the most part. But it is connected. But when you're fighting people, like you don't want to get like droned in. But I think that's interesting. And I think Old Man's War, especially if you like implant technology, I think that's something that you probably enjoy because they have a lot of like really interesting stuff. And there's a bunch of books in the series. There's probably like 7 of them now. It's really well written. Old Man's War is really great. It's being made into a TV series.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
And it's not nonfiction. So it's like the basic premise is old people go to war in space. Now, how do they do that? Like Earth is basically a feeder colony for for a government of humans that like have built interstellar nationality, like whatever, and like Earth is kept purposely primitive, so like there's always a population of people and recruits. It's very weird. It's very interesting. I like it.
Interesting. Yeah. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, well, you can check it out with that Libby app I was telling you about. Save some money.
I don't know if we talked about this while we were recording. Do you want to talk about it?
So everyone out there, I read too much. So we were talking before, and he was talking about how like budgets, and you just don't want to spend a lot of money on things in a lot of situations. But Libby is you go get a library card. It's really easy. You take your mail from your current address. You go to the library. You get it. If you don't have mail with your name on it, go to the library and have them postcard you it. It's free. So you take this library card, and you get the Libby app, and it can be on your PC, phone, what have you. I have mine on my phone. And you hook it up and you get all of their ebooks to your phone. So imagine having Amazon Unlimited or whatever it is, where you get the ebooks for like a monthly subscription. I think that's what it is. But you get it for free. It's all free. And it all exists. And so there's millions and millions of free ebooks that you can check out. And it's like, oh, you check it out for like 20 days, but it's like, who cares, right? You can recheck it out if you want to read it for longer or for shorter or what have you. And it's really fantastic. I've probably saved like $10,000 doing it this way.
Dang. That's really cool.
And the great thing is, like, instead of like torrenting or what have you, the content creators who have made this, they still get something for this. Like the libraries pay for this, the ability to use these things. So it still sees its way back to the authors, which is still great. Because sometimes it's like you don't have the money, but you also still want to be supportive. So like this kind of is being supportive. Like it's more supportive than torrenting. So it's like morally appropriate. And you won't get viruses. So that's kind of nice.
That's really cool. So I'm going to check this out. I'm going to definitely make sure I'm in on this. Because, yeah, I mean, right now I'm not spending so much on, I used to, like I said, I used to do 100 books in a year, but now it's like 40, something like this. So it's still, per year, I guess that is something like, $400. So it's not insignificant. This will definitely be nice. So I'll be able to send you, what's $400? I don't know. Some kind of scooter or something like this. I don't know.
Isn't $400 $40,000 compounded over 20 years?
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. So in 20 years, you can expect a Tesla car from me. But anyways, do you want to talk about your show, where people can find you and where you're to be found on the interwebs?
On the interwebs. Well, on the Timmy Computer Network, and that's if anyone ever watched The Fairly Odd Parents growing up, that might be a reference that doesn't fly with anyone. But on the internet, you can find me at learningwithlowell.com, and it's learning with, and then my name, Lowell, LOWELL.com. And you can find me literally anywhere on the internet when it comes to podcasts. I'm on all of them. And I think I might even be on Spotify now. So like anywhere you can listen to it, iTunes, Google, TuneIn, Stitcher. If your phone connects to the internet, or if your device connects to the internet, you'll be able to hear my voice. And as you heard today, it's kind of nice sometimes. But more importantly, you get to hear a lot about guests. And there's been 50 episodes so far. I'm doing, like I said, a series on longevity where I have all the scientists pretty much in the industry coming on to talk about it. I'm doing a series on citrus greening where it's citrus like oranges. As to give an example that hits home to you, 80% of the oranges in Florida have been wiped out for citrus greening. It's like the blight from Interstellar. And so that's like, we're going to do a series on that. And another one on antimicrobials. So you got 50 episodes of people building great stuff that are just scientists like penguin experts, to people who've started startups, and you kind of learn about their journey, to soon really great content that it'll be more like a radio lab or a Freakonomics types episode if you're into that. But what about you? Where can people find you?
Wow, that sounds really cool, first of all. Yeah, so Neural Implant Podcast, subscribe. I'm also on like all the things, probably iHeartRadio or whatever, like Stitcher, iTunes, of course. Yeah, so just Neural Implant Podcast, neuralimplantpodcast.com. I think you can listen there too. And I do interviews with the leaders in the field of brain-computer interfaces. And my personal interest is the bioelectronic medicine that we talked about before a little bit, and peripheral nerve implants and this kind of stuff. But basically, I try to hit everything. It's really, really cool stuff, and it's kind of exploding right now. So that's kind of what I'm doing. And eventually, I want to do a documentary. So kind of Radio Lab style episode, but with video and only once.
Well, first of all, I should probably specify that everything that I talk about on my podcast is like biotech or science related. I don't think I specified that. But are you familiar with the National Geographic grants that they give to people who are trying to start something for the first time? It's like $3,000 to $5,000.
Oh, no.
I'm going to apply for one as well. So yeah, I think they're like the deadline's coming up pretty soon. So I'd apply. I'll make a note. I'll do it after this. I'm sorry. Yeah, Nat Geo, they do a lot of great stuff. Like there's some that are specifically designed to someone who hasn't done anything before. So they could help support your documentary, and then it gets on their platform, which is a double bonus, because then you could say you made something for Nat Geo, which is fantastic, or supported by Nat Geo, which is equally as good. And then, saves you.
That's really cool. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's called an early career grant, and they're typically funded from $5,000 to $10,000. So yeah, that's really cool. I think I'll apply.
Did you just pull that up? How did you know? You went from like not knowing to knowing that in like a minute. Did you pull that up?
I did. Yeah.
I was like, geez, were you like pretending to like how to explain it for the viewer? Like that's really smart.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, for people who are listening today and are like, hey, this guy's really smart, just imagine he's going to be talking to people even smarter than him. So like you're going to get different perspectives, different passions, and you're going to be able to hear this person talk about his passions in relations to their stuff as well. So it's going to be a really fantastic stuff. If you want to check his website, and all those links will be in the show notes. Like they'll be like specially noted. You'll be able to click them and make it really nice and easy for you to check out all of his content. And yeah, so I like to make it easier for people to find you. It'll be really easy.
Excellent. Keep it simple. I'm an engineer. We do the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. Well, it's like sometimes it's like, how do you spell Lowell, right? Or how do you spell neural implant? But yeah, you can find it in the show notes if you're worried. So that way you can, exactly. Yeah. But is there like a typical way that you end a podcast? Or is this it?
Yeah, usually I go.
Really? I can do it with you, so we're on the same page.
Okay,
really?
Sounds good. 3, 2, 1.
I don't know if that's serious, but if it is, cool. That's funny either way.
Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed it. I was pleasantly surprised actually with how good it ended up. I thought like, okay, he's had a lot of people on in very, very different fields, and especially like genetics and everything like this, which doesn't really interest me that much. And I know there is a role in genetics in neural implants, but I'm not really too big a fan, but I was actually surprised how relevant, I guess, the material was that he brought. So I think this will be good. I think this will be a recurring thing. Maybe we'll do it every 6 months or every year or something like this, and just check back like, hey, who have you talked to in the last 6 months or a year that could be interesting for me? And I'll do the same for him. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll talk more next time.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.